Jim Murley, Executive Director, South Florida Regional Planning Council.
Okay.
It really has quite an interesting history. It goes back to the 1960s, and at that time, the counties in South Florida, Miami-Dade, Broward, Collier, and Lee over on the southwest coast, they were interested in promoting a new airport, and it became known as the Jetport, and it was a very controversial project. And it actually was built in the early 1970s. It's on a Tamiami Trail. It's actually located in Collier County, but it's part of and owned by Miami-Dade County Aviation Department. Today it's not an airport. Make sure we emphasize that, but it is used for practice takeoffs and landings. And it ultimately, the idea of a new international airport in the Everglades was not a good one, and it ended. But the Jetport Council, which had been created, emerged as later in the 1970s as the South Florida Regional Planning Council. And in part, that's because the state of Florida was interested in having local and regional planning as we were going through one of our historical growth phases. And they asked the counties in 11 regions of the state to form regional planning councils. So we were ultimately formed and over time became the South Florida Regional Planning Council, and our counties are Monroe County, the Florida Keys, Miami-Dade County, and Broward. Prior to being at the South Florida Regional Planning Council, I was at Florida Atlantic University, which is one of the two state universities in Southeast Florida. It's based, the home campus is in Boca Raton. I worked out of the Fort Lauderdale office. I'm the head staff person. The council really hires two people, myself and the general counsel, their attorney, Sam Gorin. So all the other employees I'm responsible for and I hire. And you know, we have a planning staff and we have our support staff, and we do a lot of activities, not just planning. We're involved in small business support and climate change and other things. So we are not a large agency, probably 15 people total, smaller than what we were in the past, as a lot of government has shrunk as we went through the recession and other pressures. But we do a lot of partnering with our governments, our county governments, city governments, and private not-for-profits. Our base funding comes in the form of membership dues from the three counties, and those are derived from a formula of a number of cents per person based on the latest data we have from the census. We get grants and other revenues which make up our total budget each year. Well, we have a lot of opportunities, certainly. We are a crossroads of Central and Latin America, and with the opening of the Panama Canal and widening of the opening of the expansion to the Panama Canal, we would expect trade and a movement of goods and people from the Far East increasingly. But the airports and the ports that make up South Florida are absolutely key to our future. Being able to move goods and be able to have access to the capitals around the world from our airport. Those are the investments from the public standpoint that are very important, and obviously need to be coordinated with a lot of private players. So at a regional standpoint, the Regional Planning Council works with a host of transportation planning agencies. There's no one agency that is solely responsible. So we have Department of Transportation, we have metropolitan planning organizations in Dade and Broward, we have the Regional Transportation Authority, as we know, Tri-Rail. So without trying to list them all, the important point is it takes a lot of collaboration on transportation, and it's absolutely key to our economic development. So that has brought a very diverse population to the region, very much one now that in many cases is foreign-born and being absorbed into our community. Sometimes that presents challenges, but in the long run, it's a great asset. And that's what I think is attracting new business and investment.
Okay.
Is that people come here knowing that we have are willing to accept a vast diversity in people, and welcome them both as visitors, tourists, and as part-time residents, and ultimately as full-time residents and citizens. In the last 4 or 5 years, as there's been a growing recognition throughout the country and, in fact, the world about this phenomenon which we now call climate change, which even as a term is difficult for people to understand. Maybe I can put this in the context because, Florida is a peninsula surrounded by water, and it is very flat. And on top of that, our geographic location puts us in the tropics. So if you talk about vulnerability to the climate, by definition, that vulnerability has existed for eons, and it exists every year as we hit hurricane season. So hurricanes are a weather phenomena. It's a storm system that today, because of TV and satellites, we can literally see it real time leaving the coast of Africa, and heading towards us, and then we get the scope of vulnerability. So as residents of our region, we're very aware of these intense weather events, and they are and can be impacted by climate change. But the important thing to put into context here is they are events. They're not, they're going to happen. We're going to prepare for them if we're unfortunate enough to experience one, like we have historically and will in the future. Then we know how to respond and recover and get ourselves back to normal. Mm-hmm. So those events, and we may see them also because of climate change. We may see high tide events that are more severe than they've been in the past. And we may see flooding events from intense rain, which may be more intense in the future. But with that as context, we're talking about these events that we can really kind of visualize because we've had experience with them, and we know they can be severe, or they can be just nuisances that we have to live with. Because we are located in the tropics. We can't change that, so that's a given. Now we need to talk about sea level rise a little bit differently, because sea level rise is not an event. Sea level rise is the impact of the warming of the oceans. And anybody that knows, if you heat water, it expands. Literally, that's what's happening to our oceans. As the atmosphere warms, the bodies of water that are, 2/3 of the mass of the world are expanding. And over the last 100 years, we have measured empirically at Key West 9 to 11 inches of actual sea level rise. So it's no question that it's happening. It's happened over thousands of years. There's cycles that happen. If you go back to what we learned in school about glaciers, it used to cover most of North America. Well, the glaciers, masses of ice, absorbed the water. So the land areas actually expanded and the ocean shrunk. But when the glaciers melted, then the oceans recovered back to where we know them today. Mm-hmm. But the second part of the sea level rise discussion, in addition to the heating of the oceans, is that if we are, and this is what we worry about in the future, if we are really warming the atmosphere dramatically, then we're going to see melting of the ice on Greenland and Antarctica. Yeah. And that adds the volume of water, and that will accelerate sea level rise. Mm-hmm. If the ice that's floating in the ocean melts, that's actually not sea level rise, because that's just like a glass. If you have a glass with ice in it and water, and the ice melts, the volume of the water doesn't change. It's absolutely the same. So because ice suspended in water is just in a different form. Mm-hmm. But when the ice is on land and it melts, then you could have dramatic changes of the volume of water in the oceans. So this phenomena that we are looking at as sea level rise, it's not an event, and we know it's happening. What we're concerned about is that as much as what we read, because is a developed world, we have expanded dramatically the amount of carbon dioxide that we're emitting from power plants or from cars. And the scientists are telling us, and it's there's always disagreement in science, but the vast majority of the scientists are telling us that that phenomena of putting more CO2 back into the atmosphere is causing and accelerating the warming. And therefore, we have a lot of things that we're trying to do worldwide or in the country, and we can do things in our region also. Mm-hmm. And we're very lucky that our counties have taken the lead, and they've been recognized as national leaders. When President Obama was here for World Environment Day, and he was at Everglades National Park, he mentioned the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact. Mm-hmm. And that's a group of counties. It's the 3 counties in our region, plus Palm Beach, which is in a separate region to the north, coming together. And it's those counties took the initiative to come together and address these questions and challenges and help themselves adapt. And that's a very important word now in our vocabulary, adaptation. Thinking about how we develop and redevelop in the future so that we may be better prepared for really what mm-hmm. may be unknowns, but what are forecasted changes in sea level rise.